With just 4 days to go until the 2025 NFL Draft, is it a guarantee that Brandon Beane and the Buffalo Bills are going to either move up in round 1 or round 2? They could be getting aggressive. We're going to discuss those possibilities and some insight from an NFL insider as to what Buffalo might do on Thursday. But first, make sure you are subscribed to the channel because with only 4 days to go until the big draft, we are bringing you the best Bills content on YouTube. Any rumors that will come out, any visits that are happening last minute before the draft happens, we will let you guys know right here on YouTube. So subscribe, and we'll also bring you a pick video for every single selection that the Bills do make. So lock us in as your number one spot for Bills content on YouTube. Hit that big red sub button right now. Okay, so with the Bills, having 10 selections in this upcoming draft, they just don't have room for 10 rookies. I mean, you got to think. They have a pick in round 1, 2 picks in round 2, round 4, round 5, round 6. And if you look at what they have here, they just don't have the room to put 10 rookies on the active roster, on the 53-man. I mean, you got to think, like last year, they pick a guy like Daquan Hardy in the 6th round who spends the entire season on the practice squad. So, the Bills just don't have room for 10 rookies to be playing. And what they should be doing at this point is addressing high-impact players, guys who can start day one for a team that only has a couple of holes left on the roster at this point. Now, Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated was asked a plethora of questions about the upcoming NFL draft, and he had this to say on what Buffalo might do early on. He said, well, the Bills have shown they're open to a big swing this offseason, making calls on Myles Garrett and Max Crosby before signing Joey Bosa. So just conceptually, I wouldn't rule out something aggressive. I'm just not sure this is the draft year to do something like that. Well, what I will say is the Bills are very, very close to eclipsing their demons and making a Super Bowl and potentially bringing one home to Orchard Park and the 716. Super Bowl champions, teams that win the big one, they make aggressive moves. They make moves for the guys that they believe in, and those moves usually end up paying off. Look at what the Philadelphia Eagles do. Howie Roseman, one of the most aggressive general managers in all of football. And Brandon Beane's done his job to make aggressive moves from time to time to put this Bills team in position to win these ball games. But, at the end of the day, it just hasn't happened yet. So could we see one happening in this upcoming draft? I would not expect a trade down, especially with the Bills, in my opinion, not being likely to use all 10 draft selections. How many trade downs are possibilities there actually going to be for Buffalo to coup and gather more draft capital? I just don't see that happening, especially with them being at the back half, the last few picks of round 1. They made the draft day trade to move out of round 1 last year. And, the Kansas City Chiefs hopped above them, and they got a real impact player in Xavier Worthy. But this is not unfamiliar territory for Brandon Beane to be trading up in round 1. He has a good history of it. In 2018, the biggest move in Bills history, I'll come out and say that. No thought about it. Moving up from 12 to 7 to go up there and select Josh Allen. Then you move fast forward to 2022, where you move up 2 spots to go select Kair Elam. And then in 2023, you move up another 2 spots to select Dalton Kincaid. So one absolute home run out of the park type of aggressive move from Brandon Beane. And then these 2 marginal ones, obviously you trade away Kair Elam this offseason, didn't really work out as the Bills' CB of the future. Luckily, Christian Benford has to this point. And then Dalton Kincaid, the jury is still out at this point. Going to need a big improvement in year 3 from him. But, Brandon Beane's not a stranger to moving up in the draft if he goes and sees a prospect that he thinks can contribute right away, because both of these guys were starters very early on in their Bills' careers. What do the Bills need? What could the Bills be trading up for in this draft? Well, CB2 is a starter on this football team that is necessary, and that is one that is absolutely needed at this point because they don't have a certified cornerback too. They just signed Trey White to bring in some of the veteran leadership and culture back into the locker room, into the defensive secondary, because they lose Micah Hyde. They lose Jordan Poyer last offseason. They bring in Dane Jackson back for more of that veteran leadership, but do I really want to have him start 17 games? Probably not. CB2 is a huge priority in this draft, as is defensive tackle. Bills have not been able to stop the run over the last half decade. It's gotten them into some bad spots from time to time. DT is absolutely they need to address early on. Wide receiver, please, can we get Josh some more weapons? I mean, I know they do it by committee, but what's stopping Buffalo from finding a blue chip talent that could start, for a long time, multiple years in this Buffalo offense? Safety needs depth. Not sure that I want DeMar Hamlin starting all 17. And then pass rusher. You can never have too many pass rushers. You got a couple suspended. You got one that is on a 1-year contract, and Joey Bosa. So these are the Buffalo draft needs, and I think there are a couple of different possibilities for Buffalo to trade up to select some great players at these couple of positions. That's what we're going to talk about next. Specific scenarios. If you see a player drop to a certain spot in the draft, if I'm Buffalo, I'm going up and making those moves to trade up for them. Before we get into that, though, I want to hear from you in the comments section. Should the Bills trade up in round 1 to go get a blue chip prospect? Type Y for yes, type N for no. I'm trying to hear from the Mafia right now on if you think Brandon Beane and this Bills front office should get aggressive in the draft. Starting off, Buffalo should trade up for Jahdae Barron at 16. The Arizona Cardinals currently have that pick. But Jahdae Barron is kind of a can't-miss prospect for me in this draft. Now, he's not exactly the most ideal size and at 5'10", where you don't necessarily want a guy at 5'10" on the outside on the boundary at corner, but he can play all over the secondary, and he can fill a ton of needs for Buffalo that they currently have. Like he could spot snaps as safety. What about in the nickel? Playing your primary spot at the CB2. He's been able to do it for a very, very talented Texas Longhorn defense. 16 PBUs in 2024, tied for the SEC lead there. Turned the ball over 6 different times in 2024. And that was a huge step up from what he did back in 2023, where he was still a solid productivity player, but really took it to the next level in 2024. Allowed a passer rating in college of 33.1 in 2024. He was absolutely disgusting for Texas this past year, and I think he's just going to be a for sure day one starter in the NFL. He's a gamer. This is a good overall, all-around football player, and there's a couple of teams that you could think about, being in front of Buffalo now, but behind pick 16, where you could go up and jump for Jahdae Barron. Teams like the Cincinnati Bengals there at 17, Tampa Bay, Denver, Green Bay, Minnesota, the Rams, Baltimore, like they're all these teams that you see on the bottom of your screen could be in the market for a corner. And this is kind of all assuming that Will Johnson will be gone off the board there at 13 to the Dolphins or something like that. So if Jahdae Barron slips anywhere into the back half of the first round, I'm calling up some of those teams up there and saying, what do you want for a pick in the mid-teens? Let's move on to the next spot, though. What about your top defensive tackle on your board at pick 20? So obviously assuming that Mason Graham is not going to have the biggest draft slide in NFL history, and he's going to go well inside the top 10. But there are 3 different defensive tackles that I can see going anywhere from the 13 and the early to mid-teens all the way into the second round. And it just so happens sometimes these positions can go on runs in a certain round of the draft. The 3 names that I'm looking at this point is Derek Harmon out of Oregon, Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, and Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. Now, these are all 3 incredibly productive players last season, and all 3 provide, varying skill sets. You see Walter Nolan, who had 11 tackles for loss and 7 sacks last year. Yeah, more of your 3-tech pass rusher type of big body. Oh, but about Kenneth Grant, who kind of provides the best of both worlds, the plus 300-pounder. A guy who's going to just stuff the middle and play that one technique spot. And then Derek Harmon, kind of the best of both worlds as well. He can attack you in the run game. He can attack you in the pass game. Another massive body who gave tons of teams in the Big Ten trouble. I'm looking at these guys. If you think about the teams behind Buffalo, if they were to trade up to 20, Pittsburgh could be looking at defensive tackle. So could the Chargers, Green Bay, and Minnesota. Again, they need players similarly to how Buffalo does on the defense. Baltimore and Detroit, as well as Houston, could all be looking at defensive tackle. And with this many teams in front of Buffalo from 20 to 30, you gotta think that at least 1 or 2 of these guys is going in that spot. What do you guys think, though? If we're trading up for a corner or a defensive tackle, what's the higher priority in your book for this Buffalo defense? Let me know in the comments section. Type CB or DT on what the higher priority for you is on this Buffalo defensive depth chart. How about Mike Green, a player we haven't talked about much here on the Bills Breakdown, but he is being mocked kind of all around anywhere from 11 all the way to 25 here in 2025. So another player who could really go anywhere. And if Buffalo's in love with him, while they haven't brought him in for a top 30 visit yet, he has shown nothing but production. Led the entire country in sacks last year. Some of the things that the Bills couldn't do late in the playoffs, it kind of was their demise, could not get to the quarterback. Mike Green knows how to get to the quarterback. And in the Sun Belt last year, he was taking a defense that wasn't all that great in 2023 to a new level. 59 pressures, 3 forced fumbles, a nose for the football. I love what Mike Green was able to do, and he's not exactly the biggest player out there. He's only 6'3", 250, but man, he just knows how to be agile, athletic, can bend, can get to the quarterback with quickness. And with Baltimore, Detroit, Washington, all ahead of Buffalo in this scenario, this would only be a trade-up scenario to me personally if Mike Green was to have a massive slide, and I don't know why, but maybe some of these more playoff-ready, win-now teams like Baltimore, Detroit, and Washington would be willing to take a swing on him in front of Buffalo. So I would hope to potentially jump those teams if Green ended up falling all the way to 24. But as far as first-round trade-up scenarios go, I don't see a ton for Buffalo. How about Trey Amos if he ends up falling? If Buffalo, say, goes to defensive tackle with their first selection, what about Trey Amos falling all the way to 42? He's getting mocked around the late first or the early to mid second round. And who knows if corner is kind of slipping in this draft. I don't necessarily think it will with guys like Siobhan Revel Jr., Maxwell Harrison, Trey Amos, Benjamin Morrison, all kind of being mocked around that late first, early second round. Like if Amos ends up being one of those guys that slips, a true zone corner for Buffalo, I want to see them go up and select him. Maybe package or throw in one of their 4th round picks to move up earlier in round 2. With San Fran, Dallas, you got so many other teams that are cornerback hungry in front of the Bills there in round 2. I could easily see this being a spot where they go up and select Trey Amos, who they have brought in on a top 30 visit, somebody who Buffalo is very fond of in their front office, and so am I, man. He had that tie with Jahdae Barron for PBUs at 16 in the SEC, leading that big conference there. He held quarterbacks to a passer rating of 55 last year. He was an absolute dog, and this is somebody who really got to shine after he got to a new spot in Oxford, Mississippi. Now, that was a very talented defense, but big ups to Trey Amos for making that happen. I love his ability to track receivers vertically down the sideline. Love his athleticism. He's got good size at 6'1". So I'm all in on the Bills getting Trey Amos one way or another in this draft. I'd even be fine with them taking him at 30. But if they don't and he falls anywhere past 40, really, in my opinion, in that second round, then the Bills got to make a call and trade up and get Trey Amos. But who's your guy? That's my guy. Trey Amos, my guy. Who's your guy? Name a player you want the Bills to trade up for if he ends up falling to a good spot. Let me know who that guy is in the comments section, and make sure you are subscribed to the channel because the draft is just a few days away, and we're going to bring you guys nonstop Bills draft content here on the Bills Breakdown. So lock us in, hit that big red sub button. We'll see you guys all in the next one, and as always, go Bills.